You, you do me like that phone? This phone, I was sitting here, put it on video, and I was sitting here because this is going to be the first video for New Thought Society. And I'm contemplating what to say, all that good stuff, because it's going to go out to the world. It's going to be available for you to see. And my phone literally just goes 1, 2, 3 by itself and starts recording. I didn't press anything. So I guess that means, hey, you just gotta record, right? And get it done. Hey everybody, my name is Corey Wayne Anderson. I am here with New Thought Society. It's our first video, and this recording I am going to document building the society. And I used to make videos a lot. I haven't made a whole lot of videos for a very, very long time. So I'm a little bit rusty, but just bear with me. I do have a story to share as to how I got into New Thought to begin with. When I was about 18, after my first psychedelic trip. Now, I'm not telling you to just go out and do psychedelics. By all means, it's not what the purpose of this video is for. I'm just sharing my experience. After that, I realized something about myself. What it did for me was it got me out of my... This sounds so silly. It got me out of my state of mind, and it helped me see a lot of things differently, and it helped me understand my thoughts more, and how, hey, I'm not my thinking, but I do think, and I'm experiencing my thoughts internally. I had a with that understanding, that experience, I had a question, because I thought of something and it ended up happening. I thought about somebody, I would run into them, or they would call me. I'm with somebody and I say something, and then they say, hey, I was just thinking the same thing. Right? There's something there. What is it that's going on in that situation? Why am I thinking this thing and then suddenly it ends up happening? Or I'm thinking about a car and I would end up starting to see that car and seeing more and more of that car. If I'm thinking about a specific subject, I start to see and experience things that are in alignment with that specific subject. I had that question when I was younger, and it led me to finding a book called You by Charles F. Hannell. Now, Mr. Hannell turned out to be a huge author and pioneer in the New Thought movement. And he did a lot of work to move the information of New Thought forward. Now, at that time, I didn't know he was a part of New Thought. I was just reading about the information that was in his book, and he was saying specifically, he was talking about energy, he was talking about vibration, he was talking about the law of attraction, which answered the question that I had, right? There's this universal law at play. Whether I am aware of it or not, it is there happening. And everything in this life, including us, works in accordance with divine law. After that, after I graduated, high school, me and my cousin, we got into business. And it was a MLM type business, building communities, all that great stuff. It was a great product. We believed in it. We wanted to make money, all that great stuff, right? That it didn't end up happening in the end. We were still kids back then. And I ended up failing. My cousin felt that he failed too. But ultimately it fell upon me, because where I was, we were using that to have the meetings, and I wasn't ready for the responsibility of what it took to really run a business, let alone build a community. And we got pretty far. In the end, I let my cousin down. But throughout that process, my cousin ended up ordering something by a man named Kevin Trudeau. Now, Kevin Trudeau turned out to be a part of secret societies. He was a 33rd degree Mason, and he had a program. He put out a program um, called Your Wish is Your Command, how anyone can manifest millions. Now, my cousin didn't really dive too deep into it. He listened to it. And throughout that process too, he ended up getting a book called Think and Grow Rich, and same thing, he kind of just left it to the side, which at that time was very understandable. I'm sure he was very disheartened by that whole situation, that circumstance. But feeling the way I felt about it, I went through the book. I picked it up because it meant something to me. And for what it meant to me, I had to do something with it, even though it was my fault. Ultimately, cause and effect, us being divine centers of causation, and our thoughts and our attitude determine our behavior, and our behavior influences our environment and circumstances. I had to do something to become better, so I'm not letting those that I love down. And in the end, I felt like regardless of all that, it was for me, right? I went through this program, and Kevin Trudeau would talk about all these same things, about frequencies, vibration, and energy. He would talk about manifesting your reality by using your energy, by using your vibration. And this vibration is created through our mental attitude, through our state of mind, which Mr. Hanel touches upon in his book Master Key System, which I currently have as an audiobook for you to listen to on our channel, okay, on New Thought Society. And in that program too, he talks about Think and Grow Rich. Now, Napoleon Hill, this man left who was a direct mentee of Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie being not knowing anything about steel, but yet was in the steel business. And he became the wealthiest man in the world during his time. But Andrew Carnegie knew specific principles. These principles that we're going to be covering and teaching through New Thought. He knew these principles and he applied them. And he was able to become the wealthiest man in the world during his time in a business he essentially knew nothing, with a product that he essentially knew nothing about. In Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill talks about our thought. That if you could grasp, he says in the very beginning of the book, thoughts are things. And if you grasp the reality of this part of the book, the rest of the book is almost, I don't want to use the word obsolete, but he says you've already learned half of everything you're going to learn here if you understand the basic spiritual principle of thought and our mental attitude. And, I studied that, I got into it. But being so young, I still did not know what I wanted to do, right? Who I wanted to be. And that's the real statement right there. I didn't know who I wanted to be. No, I was 18 when I started reading this stuff. I was still a kid. And when I was younger, the videos I was making was about me reading the books, talking about what I was learning, how I was applying it in my life. And we were having some success. We had people asking us to read a book for them, which pertained to New Thought, and explain what was in there and what was being said. But being so young at the time, I just, like I said, I wanted to experience what was out there for me when it came to opportunities and how to make money to earn my living. And after that, I got into personal training. Absolutely love personal training. Before that, I was in insurance. This most recent thing, right now I'm working at Walmart. I'm learning a ton from studying Walmart's system. Now, Walmart, the reason why Walmart is because of their system. They have a working system, and this system runs through what Mr. Hill, Napoleon Hill, teaches as the master mind, right? There's a giant mind created out of the minds of every individual involved in that opportunity, that job, that community, that congregation, that organization, right? If you have one person who comes in with something and then another person joins them, and they really, really get to know each other, they start to become one. They start to develop a higher mastermind that intermingles between both of them. And this is the reason why, if you're with somebody, you say something or they say something, and either one of you says, I was just thinking that, is because you're sharing the same mental atmosphere. This is how the principle of the mastermind works. This is how building a successful organization works. Now, a great example of this in play, if you look at ants. Now, I remember when I was laying in my trailer, it's a little bit embarrassing, but it is what it is. I had a trail of ants in my trailer. The reason was because I had a cat at the time that I had rescued. At least I was out, which ironically, law of attraction, I brought that cat to me. I was thinking about a cat, and when I went to CVS to pull out some money, when I walked out of CVS, there was somebody that had a kitten and was asking me if I wanted it, right? I don't remember how long after. It was like a couple days after I was thinking about a kitten, because I do love cats. Right? That's an example of the law, and it works in accordance with what we are thinking. The nature behind this law all leads back to consciousness, because consciousness is a substance of the universe. Consciousness is the intelligence of God. Right? There's no such thing as empty space. It's all filled with a living, breathing, well, I don't know if we could use the word breathing, but a living, conscious essence, the spirit of the universe, so to speak. It's infinite intelligence. This is the very power which Christ taught as the living God. But anyway, back to these ants. Right, the stray cat, the man had already named it Freeway because he picked it up off the freeway. So I decided to keep the name, right? Freeway. Beautiful cat, crazy little cat. But she ended up leaving, right? She ended up going, doing her own thing. I was very sad about it, but it is what it is. I worked a lot of the time, and how that cat grew up, it probably just felt like the streets were where, streets were its thing. It had no problem going about doing its own thing. But anyway, showing gratitude. I know cats do this too. They say to show gratitude to the owner. The cat brought in a giant grasshopper. It was just laying there in the middle of my floor. And that's where these ants came from. But aside from all that, I was studying the ants. And I was like really, really just looking at them. I wasn't really thinking about what they were doing. I was watching what they were doing, right? I was observing what was happening in front of me. Because sometimes if we think too much about something, our thoughts get in the way of what it actually is, right? That's why a part of this philosophy and what you'll learn here is to actually just stay still. Be observant. Just be aware of what's going on and observe it without letting your thoughts get in the way, so you can see it for what it actually is and not just for what you think it is, right? So I was really observing and watching, and I was these ants, they're in alignment. They're picking apart the grasshopper. They're carrying pieces of it all the way back to their home, right? They're their own organization. It's their plan of action to colonize, to live, to be, to do more, to be more as a species. And they're all operating with the same purpose. They're all operating under the influence and power of the mastermind. right? Because everything is made out of consciousness. It shows us, science today in quantum physics, high energy physics shows us that whatever the seeming physical reality we see is not really physical, right? Everything is made out of atoms, and atoms are pure potential energy. And these atoms, in turn, are made out of subatomic particles. And these subatomic particles came into existence from this invisible, immanent, omnipresent, omniscient, immortal, conscious intelligence, right? The infinite intelligence of the universal mind, which pervades everything and is everything. And when you break down the structure of the atom, when it comes to the protons, neutrons, and electrons, the proton and neutron, which is the nucleus of the atom, only constitutes 0.04% of the body of the atom, while the other 99.96% of the atom is filled with this electron cloud, and within the electron cloud pops in and out of existence electrons, which, you know, the electron is the most basic particle in the entire universe. And through the double slit experiment, it shows that through observation, through the power of an individual's mind, they're literally telling the electron, which is not attached to an atom, right, with these free floating electrons. Okay, the electron can exist as both a wave and a particle simultaneously. It's the only particle that can do that. I think the photon is able to do that too, but we still have a lot of studying and learning when it comes to that. But the electron can exist as either pure energy, which is pure vibration, pure consciousness, or it can exist as a particle, something solid, something that'll become material. And we know that and on top of that, these electrons exist outside the nucleus of the atom. So these electrons are you know, everything you see that's solid is a conglomeration of protons, neutrons, and electrons. But the proton and neutron are the only part that is inside the nucleus of what makes matter matter. Well, the electron is floating around, existing on the outside of that atom, outside of the nucleus of that atom. And back to what I was saying, it exists as both a wave, a vibration, energy, and a particle. The double slit experiment shows that through our observation, what we perceive something to be is going to determine the attitude of the electron. It determines the behavior of what an electron does. Now, a part of this explains how we, as humans, as spiritual beings, create our reality. And it shows the law of attraction, right? The law of vibration in process, in action. There's a lot to uncover. There's a lot to uncover, and we're still in the process of growing and learning ourselves. But we want to take you along with us. And, you know, New Thought not only explains this information, going back to that atom, we are made out of these atoms. We are these atoms. When the atom becomes a molecule, that's when it takes on a physical property. That's when it becomes its own thing, right? The only difference between me and this pen is a conglomeration of atoms. And the molecules of which these atoms express themselves as, right? We're still made out of the same thing, but we are organic matter. Well, this is inorganic matter, but yet we're made from the same subatomic particles. Then the law of electromagnetism, which is the scientific quantum physics term of the law of attraction, because everything is electromagnetic in energy. That is why when I thought about those cars, I started to see those cars, because the vibration and energy of my thought, which is an electromagnetic force, is traveling through this ether, this infinite mind, so to speak, and is attaching to other like vibration. And through whatever miraculous, mysterious ways this universe works, I continue to live my life, and I'm placed in a situation to where I see that car, that vehicle, and that's it's amazing. It's now I know people are waking up to the reality of this. I know as I go through this process of doing all this, I may face a lot of ridicule. We know how people are on the internet, how selfish and self-centered they could be, um, how much they will only care about themselves and what they do, or how they feel and how they think. We see it all the time, things happening to people, and all the bad things people like to say. They call them trolls, right? All the trolls on the internet. And ultimately, these are just, it was one of the presidents, I can't remember which president it was, but he said, if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks, you're never going to get to where you want to be. You're never going to become who you want to be. You're never going to get to where you want to go, right? You have to learn how to just, it is what it is. That is a reflection of their character, their mental attitude, and ultimately they have to live with themselves. Because one thing in this life, most people don't even really like themselves, so you can't really care of who says what or who does who or who doesn't like you. Chances are these people don't even like themselves, so, right, who cares? Excuse my Italian, but who gives a fuck? And I have something to say and something to share, and I want to bring you along with me, and I have somebody that I want to be. In order for me to actually be this, I have to get myself out there. And we have to have the courage and the conviction to get out there and do it and be it and show it, regardless of all the things that people might say. Now, every leader, author of these books, all face ridicule. We look at the Christ, the most perfect man that was recorded, who embodied the image and characteristics of God, and who literally sacrificed his own life to bring that reality to you, to me, to us. The most perfect recorded man, people didn't like him, right? So we can't expect to be on the loving end of every individual, when not even the Christ was loved by everybody. Now, speaking of Christ, the mission of New Thought is to bring, in Abel Allen's word, gladness to the Western world when it comes to the reality and teachings of the Christ. For we know by Apostle Paul that Christ is the image of God in man. And I believe it's in Corinthians or was it Colossians? One of the two. I'm still studying the Bible too, because I know that me doing this and believing myself that, hey, Christ came to give us, and he told us himself that all of us can embody God. All of us can do what he did. If we only listen and understand, there's a spiritual science within what Christ taught. And I believe that if the seed of Christ is the image of God in us, and if God is dwelling within us through our subconscious mind, right? We don't need to make our hair grow. We don't need to make our skin grow. We don't need to make our hair grow. We don't need to digest our food. There's a power inside of us doing that for us. We know this power is the subconscious mind. It is a power that is just working and is just, it works outside our conscious mind, our thinking mind, right? I mean, I don't know about you, I can't think about doing all the work I need to do while at the same time thinking about how many carbohydrates my cells need, right? There's a power inside of us doing that. And it's the Father within, as the Christ taught. The kingdom of heaven is within us. It is not I that doeth the work, it is the Father within me. He doeth the work. I do what I see the Father do. So we know that the Father, the infinite mind, has characteristics. It has goals. It has a specific purpose of what it moves towards. And Christ is the embodiment of these characteristics within us, our personal state of awareness, our personal individual beingness, so to speak, right? Because I'm identified as Corey Wayne Anderson. That's my name. But yet the spirit of which I am made out of is the same spirit of which you are made out of. Right? The difference between it is just our own point of awareness, that I'm experiencing my life as Corey Wayne Anderson, just as you're experiencing your life as whoever you are, viewer. But back to the Christ. In the Quimby manuscripts, we're going to be going over this book very, very soon. Right now, we're finishing up a history of the New Thought movement. We currently have The Message of New Thought by Abel Ellen out. We have Master Key System by Charles F. Hannell out, and we're in the process of getting a history of the New Thought movement out. And in a history of the New Thought movement, Horatio Dresser is talking about Quimby, this man who started as a hypnotist, and he got into, well, he started off as a mesmerist. He was very, very sick, and the doctors were saying that there was absolutely nothing that could be done for him, and he accepted his fate that he was going to die a sick man. But he heard a friend of his was talking about how much he enjoyed horseback riding, and Quimby said, you know what, I'm going to go give it a try. I'm going to go horseback riding. And throughout his experience horseback riding, he was in the carriage because he was so weak he couldn't walk. So he was in a carriage laying down, the horse is pulling him along, he's enjoying what he's seeing, right? He's enjoying nature. And through this process, he was feeling better. He was feeling very, very good. He was enjoying nature. He was enjoying his life. And he forgot about his sickness because he was so busy enjoying his life, right? That experience put him in a certain mental attitude, which is an internal process, a spiritual process. And he realized a lot from that experience. That's what opened him up to the spiritual aspect of life. And he ended up getting into mesmerism because he was interested in a man called Anton Mesmer, who believed he was healing people through what they called animal magnetism. Now, that's a term at the time. We don't use that term today because we understand more today. Throughout mesmerism, Quimby learned, that's exactly what Quimby learned, that because Mesmer was using items, he was using, let's say, if you had a headache and I was Mr. Mesmer, I would come to you with some magnets, right? And I would move these magnets over you and would do, like, induce you into some type of sleep. And through your sleep, I would do, like, these suggestions, since your mind is in a state of acceptance, receptivity, you would accept these suggestions, which would change your mind, change your internal state. And through that change of that internal state, that in turn would change your bodily state, your physiology. Because we know our thoughts, our health is influenced by our thinking. And Quimby explains all this as the subconscious mind being the soil. And the seed of our thoughts is implanted within this soil. And whatever the nature of the thought is going to grow and manifest. Not only in your life on the external, but also in your body, in your health. After a while, Quimby learned want to use the word obscenery, right? How absurd it is to use tools like this, right? Christ didn't need any tools, right? Christ got people to believe, and through their belief, through their faith, they were able to heal themselves. We know the placebo effect today. There's a legitimate scientific study of patients who were sick. The scientists gave, or the doctors gave, one group the actual medication, and the other group, they just gave them a sugar pill. And the group that got the sugar pill got well, just as the group did with the pill that was made to help them. Now what they discovered is that it was through their belief in the pill that it was going to work that made them well, that made them better, right? We have science today that shows this, and these men knew this. Go back to Quimby. He ended up getting into mesmerism. Or I'm sorry, we're past the mesmerist part. It's all right, Mr. Wayne. Remember, it's authenticity. Just be authentic. You don't need to be perfect. He got into hypnotism, and through hypnotism, he had his subject Lucius, and Lucius was receptive to these mental states. Like Quimby was able to put him to sleep, and through his sleep state, he was able to read the minds of the people around him, or read things that were what they were. For example, Quimby explains this in like in a history. He explains it in here too, the Quimby manuscripts, but in a portion of a history of the New Thought movement, Horatio Dresser pulls out from here a portion and puts it into a history of New Thought, and what he did with Lucius, and how when he put Lucius into a mesmeric state, and he was a hypnotic state, he was asking Lucius and talking to him about his own disease, right? Because Quimby was still sick. And Quimby explains how Lucius told him the nature of his sickness, which is exactly what the doctors had said to him. And Lucius wasn't around to even hear or know about the sickness, about the disease. And it gave Quimby the idea that Lucius was reading his mind. And this is what leads him into thinking and understanding how, hey, our thoughts are things. Our thoughts are real, legitimate forces, things. They don't really belong to us. They're coming and emanating from us, but they travel outside of us in the form of energy, of spiritual power, spiritual energy. Now back to what happened. Quimby, at that time, not even believing that there was a cure, right? He, like I said, he accepted his fate. But he ended up asking Lucius if there was a cure anyway. And Lucius told him yes, that there was. And what Lucius did, he put his hand on, I believe it was on Quimby's back, and he put his hand somewhere, and whatever the pain was that he was feeling, he said that he reattached these two pieces together, and that they're going to be well, because he was saying they were severed. A part of his, one of his organs in Quimby's body was separated. So Lucius said he was going to reattach it, and then it's going to grow and heal from there. And Quimby was like, what? Right? Like, he was flabbergasted by it. But he just listened, right? And he just accepted what Lucius was saying. And lo and behold, after that, the pain in it was around his kidney area, his lower back. He said the pain went away. Right? The pain legitimately went away after that experience. And when he put Lucius again in the hypnotic state, Lucius was telling him that, hey, he was cured. Lo and behold, he was legitimately cured from the disease. Now, well, from this point on is when Quimby just kept going with his investigations, with his discoveries, because he needed to learn and understand exactly how this happened. And throughout what he learned in his investigations. He learned about the two phases of the mind. He learned about the conscious and the subconscious mind. He learned about spiritual healing. He learned about spiritual powers. And he took everything that he learned, and he also read the New Testament, and he attached what he learned to, hey, this is what the Christ was really talking about. This is what the Christ really teaches. Now, Quimby uses the term the scientific man because he talks about Christ is the embodiment of the wisdom of God. And we know in Proverbs tells us wisdom is the absolute most important thing in the world. It is more important than anything. For wisdom is the very thing that God used to create everything in existence. Wisdom was there on the side of God since the very beginning. And if Christ, being the Son of God, the image of God in man, we would all be legitimate, real children of God through the embodiment of God's wisdom, embodying Christ consciousness, which, as we are told, Christ is the image of God in man. Everything that God is, through his infinite wisdom and through understanding that infinite wisdom, is going to allow you to step into that image of God in the flesh, which is exactly what Jesus came to teach, which is exactly what Quimby breaks down in the Quimby manuscripts. Now, in the Quimby manuscripts, he uses a lot of scientific investigations to explain this, and he teaches it as the scientific man. For the scientific man looks at things not for what he thinks he is, but for what they actually are, right? An example of this, right? My beautiful flower pin. Got this from a colleague of mine, by the way. This is a phenomenal pin. If I drop this pin, what happens, right? That's gravity. It's a legitimate universal law. Whether I believe in gravity or not, it is a law set by a higher universal intelligence. Now, it's the exact same thing with the law of attraction. It's the exact same thing with the law of cause and effect. It's the exact same thing of these mental psychological laws. Regardless of our belief, whether we believe in it or not, this is what it is. This is what God says it is. Using the language of the Bible, it is God's word, right? God's word is through wisdom. It is principle. It is understanding the laws of God. And through understanding what Quimby talked about as a scientific man, attaching it to, hey, this is what Christ was talking about. The Christ man, which is within us. It's inherent within us. Now, get this. If you, viewer, just the fact that you are able to understand God shows that the seed of God is within you. If you were not connected with God at all, you wouldn't even have any type of conscious awareness of God at all, right? Just the fact that you can have the idea or understanding of spirituality shows your connection to the spiritual principle of life, the spiritual infinite power of which you have came from. As we are told, we are created in its image. There's a lot to uncover. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of growth for me to do still. There's a lot to bring to you. But it's good. It's good. There are enough books here for years of content, and eventually we'll be able to write our own program and coach people and build a society of people in the message of New Thought. Abel Ellen talks about how Orthodox religions have lost the reality of Christ. And even in the history of New Thought, um, Quimby speaks, as Horatio Dresser puts quotations from Quimby in his book. Quimby speaks of the science of Christ, the true spiritual science of Christ was lost, right? It is something that isn't happening within churches today. And I've heard in Revelations that the first thing Christ is going to do when he comes back is judge the churches. Now, if the churches were right and spot on with everything they needed to be right about, Christ would have no reason to judge them to begin with. So obviously there's something going on with the churches today. Abel Allen talks about them being doctrines, their dogmas, their institutions. Christ didn't come to establish a church. He came to establish the truth. The truth, the church itself would have just been revolved around the truth. And he taught how to go directly to God ourselves. In churches and institutions, they have vicarious atonements, they have mediums between man and God, like Catholicism, for example. All due respect to those churches, doctrines, you have every right to believe whatever you want to believe. But when it comes to truth, that hey, God is everywhere. God is within everything. You do not need to go to another man to talk to God yourself. You don't need to confess yourself to another human when you could go directly to the Lord himself. I know that's one of the things Catholicism teaches. And then Christianity, there is power in these religions. I've seen it. I felt the power that I had after worship. I love worship. But they still don't really teach the true message and meaning of Christ. They talk about the Old Testament, they talk about the New Testament, they talk about the stories, they do apply it and give a message to real life. But what about the part where, hey, we could all heal ourselves? We can all go out and heal others. What about the part of the understanding of the conscious and subconscious mind? Why aren't they talking yet about, hey, this infinite intelligence that we have found, this quantum field that we've discovered, and how this quantum field is everywhere and receptive to all of our thinking, and how this field, this intelligence is also within us? But they don't talk about that. We love Christ, we love Jesus, but they stop at just pointing to Jesus. Now, this did cross my mind the other day. They're pointing to Jesus, which Jesus leads them back to pointing to something higher, right? It's like going back and forth, and Christ is all truth. It's like you said, the church is within us. Right, a church is it's a building, it's a house of God, it's a place for a community to come together, which is phenomenal. It's a very fantastic thing. But there is a part of it that is missing, and that part is the reality of, hey, Christ is within you. Now, how are you going to pull that part of yourself out of you? It's not going to happen by going to a church every Sunday. It's going to happen by you thinking Christ-like thoughts. By you sitting down. I remember it's in one of the scriptures. I don't remember which one. They say to sit and meditate upon the laws of God. It's going to happen when you sit and meditate upon God's wisdom. And that happens in the silence. That happens when you're alone. That happens when you dig deep into finding that inner reality, that part of yourself which is made in the image of God, which has the seed of God within it. You can only find it within. And that's the goal of this movement. That's the goal of this society. And like Abel Ellen says, now the message of New Thought is out there. It is available for you right now to listen to. At the end of chapter 1, he says, where's it at? I have it right here. What does Mr. Abel Ellen say? And I'll go to read this and end this right here, because we're already about to be 50 minutes in. Okay. He says, New Thought teaches that the revelation of God to man is a continuous process through nature, through reason, the whispering of intuition through the events and experiences of life. The objects of nature convey their message only as they awaken the divine impulse within, the desire to come into harmony with God. Molding our lives more and more into the divine likeness is the essential thought in any worthy religion. As Plato taught, the highest aspiration of man is the free imitation of God. And I know Apostle Paul said that Jesus thought it not robbery to make himself equal with God. It's in one of the scriptures. I will find it and I will show it to you. Now, finishing off with this, he says, to teach man to come into a conscious realization of the divinity within and the unity of man and God, so that out of the sublimity of his soul he can say with the gentle master, and I quote, "The Father and I are one," end quote, is the supreme purpose and meaning of New Thought. And he explains how New Thought it's a restatement of old thought using modern terms, modern information, modern understanding. For truth is truth, regardless of how it's presented. The law of gravitation is the law of gravitation, regardless of what we think about it. It is a principle set by a higher entity, a higher mind, the infinite mind. So truth is an expression of wisdom which is found in the higher mind, and Christ was the perfect embodiment and image of that wisdom and truth which is found in God. And it's not found in anything else other than God. And this process is the process of discovering all of that and bringing it to you. So that being said, this is the very first video. Can't believe I'm already 50 minutes in. I did not think it would be this long, but it is what it is. I do have a lot to say, and it also makes me feel better just talking about it. It feels good just talking about it. Kevin Trudeau says the masses will never, ever, ever know this information. But then Christ says the kingdom of heaven, which is within us, isn't. The only way to establish the kingdom of heaven on earth is to establish it within all of us, within everybody. Right? The kingdom of heaven will only happen when the kingdom is found inside of us. For we the people are what make up the government. We the people are what make up our society. We the people are what make up how things are. Because we are the power in expression. No, I don't. There has to be a turning point of when the masses awaken to this information. There has to be a turning point. I don't believe that the masses will never ever know this stuff. The only way they can never know is if it's kept from them. Jesus didn't come to keep anything from us, nor take anything from us. He came to give. And if the Christ says that the kingdom is going to be established, this kingdom is going to be established. It is written that it's going to be established, regardless of what these societies, these people in power, governmental high places, regardless of certain businesses and groups of people and members of hidden societies, so to speak, whatever they do to try to keep us down, they will fall. Because the only way they could do what they're doing is in secret. Because they know, unless it's secret, we will not let them. Anyway, I will be keeping you up to date.